All inline turbo diesels with 4 and 6 cylinders that were installed on the BMW F10 represented, in fact, one line of internal combustion engines. But naturally evolved. N47, N57, restyled B47 are almost similar. They are united by BC made of light alloys, location of the timing drive, flywheel side, Bashevskaya vehicle with piezo or electromagnetic injectors, solid margin of safety. There are no oil leaks on the seals of these engines, but the exhaust manifold needs to be cleaned every 100,000 km. The operation of its dampers no longer affects the service life of the engine, but their common axis can drill holes between adjacent channels. Sooner or later you will have to change the entire timing drive set, 2 chains, tensioners, dampers. Every 200,000 km the VKV valve membrane needs to be replaced, otherwise there will be an excess of oil in the intake. The common problem for these engines was cracking of the USR cooler. Antifreeze leaked into the intake manifold and, mixing with oil, caught fire under certain conditions. Ignition, as a rule, occurred in motion. Almost 100 cars burned completely, and many had melted intakes. The cooler was replaced under warranty at certified BMW service stations. N47N. This is a basic unit with a volume of 2 liters. When cleaning the intake manifold, it is recommended to replace the swirl flap kit. The original costs no more than $110. It is better to check timing chains for tension at least after every 200,000 km. After 150,000 km, the rubber layer of the crankshaft damper pulley may rupture. The price of the original spare part is about $350. Analog, about $280. In the summer of 2011, the BMW 525D began to be equipped with a twin-turbo engine with 4 cylinders and N47S. The use of a variable geometry turbocharger together with a supercharger with a bypass valve did not affect the reliability of the engine. However, the N47S was equipped with piezo injectors. They cannot be repaired, and their service life is about 200,000 km. The price of new injectors is $320. By the way, they are identical to those installed on the engines of the 535D models. 313 horsepower, N57. The inline 6-cylinder N57 was equipped with the first versions of the 525D and the 530D models. Only in the latter the engine was more powerful. The engine injectors are electromagnetic and can be repaired, and new ones cost around $220. It is preferable to plug swirl flaps if they cause problems, since new ones are produced only assembled with part of the intake manifold and cost more than $1,000. The resource of timing chains is +250,000 km. A damper pulley costs $220 400, N57S. For the first 2.5 years, the 535D was equipped with N57S engines, 299 horsepower. They use spherical swirl flaps, 2 discs connected crosswise. This structure prevents a torn flap from getting under the intake valve, and you won't have to turn them off. Since there are many analog kits available, N57Z, but the N57Z engine's 313 horsepower, which appeared on the 535D in the summer of 2010, have the usual intake manifold flaps. Their plug will cost less than replacement. Both N57 variants for the 535D share identical fuel injection pumps injectors and a pair of turbochargers, one with variable geometry, the other with a wastegate. These motors are quite reliable, but the injection pump is subject to wear, its drive shaft wears out, and metal particles enter the fuel system. N57X. Motors of this modification were installed on the M550DX model. Power 381 horsepower. The N57X is powered by 3 turbochargers, 2 variable geometry, and 1 wastegate. The intake manifold is made of light alloys, and the swirl flaps are made of plastic. On the BC head, the diameter of the intake valves was increased by 2 mm, but this affected its strength. The inner valve bulkheads often cracked. B47, the 4-cylinder B47, which is a modernized N47, began to be installed on the restyled F10 in 2014. It received different attachments, and the cylinder piston group became lighter by reducing the size of the rings to 1.5 mm and shortened pistons. The set of chains and timing drive life remained the same as the N47. B47, by the way, has already been recalled to replace the EGR valve. Despite the reduced, much less than 500,000 km timing chain life and expensive maintenance, turbocharged engines for the F10 cause less trouble than their gasoline counterparts. The first gasoline 5F10S did not immediately switch to turbo engines. For example, The top-end M5 received a biturbo V8 instead of an aspirated V10 in the F10 generation. A fairly common problem with inline engines for this series are oil leaks at the seals, valve covers, spark plug wells, injectors, etc. In addition, the valve membrane of the VKG system cracks over time, leading to problems associated with air leaks. It happens that both the valve and the system itself become clogged. Oil leaks intensify or its flow through the intake increases. After every 150,000 km in inline 6-cylinder engines, it is necessary to change the electric pump. Its malfunction is indicated by errors characteristic of overheating of the internal combustion engine. And it's better not to ignore them. The cost of the pump varies from $400 for the original one to $300 for a decent analog on the N52 and N53. On N55 it's about $100 more expensive. However, there is an opinion that the problem can be solved simply by replacing the resistor. N52, the debut petrol F10S, 525i and 528i, were equipped with the N52 engine. Its unpleasant feature can be called increased oil consumption due to waste already from the assembly line and weak Vanos solenoids. Saving on oil is fraught with wear of the valvetronic drive, knocking of the hydraulic compensator, and the appearance of scoring on the journals of the intake camshaft. The vacuum pump leaks almost constantly. There is a danger of engine overhaul if the damper breaks. But, overall, the N52 is not bad, especially for opponents of turbo engines. This is the only classic 6-cylinder engine in the F10 series. N20, the 520i models now have a new turbocharged 2-liter, 163, 184, 245 horsepower, N24. A little later it appeared on the 528i. Reflashing will not turn the 520i into a 528i, but it is possible to increase power with the help of chip tuning. It should be added that in 2013 they began to produce the N20 with a volume of 1.6 liters, also indexed as 520i, but with a capacity of 170 or 180 horsepower. In general, the turbo engine turned out to be reliable, with wear-resistant and, importantly, inexpensive injectors, a durable injection pump, and an indestructible valvetronic system. Over time, due to wear of the damper bushing, the turbocharger may ring and errors due to weak boost may appear. The electric pump is superior in reliability to the 6, but the expensive thermostat breaks down relatively quickly. It is better to change the timing chain after every 100,000 km, without waiting for problems. In early engines, it began to knock before reaching 70,000. A new chain in principle is capable of running 150,000 km, but the dampers can crumble earlier, which will lead to serious problems. The N20 oil pump drive chain was unpleasantly surprised by its rapid wear. Among the first N20 there were many engines on which the chain broke at 120,000 km, wrapping around the crankshaft. When changing the oil every 20,000 km, as recommended by the manufacturer, the connecting rod bearings were rotated. The company clearly overestimated this figure. As practice has shown, it is normal to change the oil after 7 to 10,000. Then the engine passes the 300,000 km mark without any problems. Well, rotation of the liners also occurs due to inept chipping. For comfortable operation of the N20, replacing the timing chain kit should, in an amicable way, be accompanied by updating the oil pump chain and bearings. But you need to prepare about $1,500 when visiting for such maintenance. N53. The N53 engines were the last petrol inline 6s and earned a bad reputation. F10 models with such engines were sold only in Europe in 2010-13. Unlike the N52, these internal combustion engines were produced without the valvetronic system and were equipped with direct injection, without oil consumption. The last feature became the main problem. The injectors and injection pump have been modified more than once. Improper spraying and flooding of cylinders disrupted engine operation, oil mixed with gasoline, and many engines failed due to water hammer. Difficulties with the fuel-air mixture significantly reduced the life of the ignition coils. The N53S remaining in service today, in principle, should be equipped with an improved fuel system in which the injectors and injection pump can survive more than 200,000 km. N55 turbo engines were installed on the 535i and the 5th active hybrid models. The engine turned out to be successful. Although oil leaks with air leaks and ringing of the turbocharger wastegate do occur, crankshaft seals often need to be replaced, but the injection pump and injectors are quite reliable, although they are very sensitive to low-quality fuel. A set of original injectors for N55 and N20 will cost $220, and the Bosch equivalent will cost $90. Quite reasonable. You don't have to worry about the timing chain and its guide for up to 200,000 km. There have been cases of air leakage through the intake pipe due to cracks in the gas supply pipes from the VCG system. When actively using the machine with N55, timely maintenance is required, otherwise the crankshaft liners may rotate and the camshaft journals may wear out. N63, this V8 with alusil-coated cylinders, although it underwent many improvements, no problems with liners or cylinder scuffing, before being installed in the F10, still retained noticeable problems. Catalysts installed in the exhaust manifold built into the cylinder head additionally heat the engine. The oil loses its properties faster and urgently needs to be replaced after every 7,000 km. Oil consumption on the N63 is already observed from the assembly line. Also, the engine is practically defenseless against the destruction of the timing chain guides. Debris may clog the oil pickup. For the chain itself, 200,000 km is the limit. The wastegate valves in turbochargers often ring. It happens that only hot air comes from the ventilation grills. In this case, you should read the errors and inspect the heater valves located under the hood next to the left glass. Replacing the valves is fairly easy and costs about $150. If antifreeze leaks from under the service valves, it is enough to replace the seals. There are inexpensive non-original repair kits on sale. The body of the 5F10 is characterized by a wider use of aluminum alloy in combination with steel. For example, steel front side members are technologically bonded with light alloy cups and mudguards. Therefore, after a large-scale frontal collision in a workshop, it is very difficult to restore the geometry and reliably connect aluminum and steel elements. If there have never been deformations, then the condition of the containment layer in the places where aluminum and steel are bonded should be monitored. Damage to it leads to corrosion, which is impossible to stop. All F10s have reliable noise and waterproofing. The trim is glued to the door around the perimeter with butyl cord. But at the bottom it lags behind over time. Moisture flowing down the door from the inside is not removed through the drainage, but seeps between the steel frame and the door card. And after a wash or rain, water accumulates on the floor at the back, causing the bottom of the cards to become moldy over time. A new butyl cord solves the problem. It also must be replaced if the original insulation was removed during door repairs. Based on the condition of the headlights, you can easily calculate the 5 rating of an F10 with a solid mileage. The more cloudy the lampshades, the longer the car has been in use. But the appearance of cracks on the front transparent part of the optics, unfortunately, is typical for all BMW cars. Over time, the cracks expand, breaking the seal of the headlights, which affects their service life. The F10 family was initially equipped with an 8-speed automatic transmission ZF8 HP45/70, and since 2015 to 8 HP 50/75, which are distinguished by speed and smoothness when changing gears. But aggressive driving quickly wears them out. In early boxes, racing experiments could cause destruction of gearboxes, but with 8 HP 50/75 endurance was increased. The first automatic transmissions withstand intensive use on average 150,000 km, and transmissions from 2015 to 250,000 is necessary to change the transmission fluid after every 60,000 km. The tightness of the pan should be checked periodically. When purchasing a car, you can get a complete picture of the automatic transmission using a proprietary scanner, X-Drive. F10 with all-wheel drive are equipped with ATC 350 35ths of a liter transfer cases. Their main inconvenience is the need to change the oil, and there is no drain. The used liquid can only be drained by removing the transfer case through the fill or using a syringe. If you do not change the oil and do not pay attention to its leakage, the pressure in the clutches connecting the front drive will not reach the required parameters. As a result, when accelerating and decelerating, the car will move jerkily. If there are shocks, it is easy to understand that the problem is in the transfer case. It is necessary to disconnect the electrical connector. Only rear-wheel drive will be used. If the shocks disappear after this, you need to diagnose the transfer case. Long slips, sharp turns at speed, and inappropriate tire sizes lead to rapid wear of friction clutches. There are cases where the servo drive unit breaks down. This is manifested by squeaking wheels and difficult starting with maximum steering turn. It is better to replace a broken block. New price $600 excluding labor. In the F10 X-Drive, sooner or later you will have to change the front drive shaft and axle CV joints. There are no replacement drive shafts produced. The original costs about $1,800. It's easier with half shafts. If the original ones cost $1,000, then acceptable analogs cost no more than $300. It's rare, but it happens that the exit splines to the rear drive shaft wear out. It stops rotating or there is strong spinning. Accordingly, rear-wheel drive does not work. In 5 BMWs in the F10 body, the rear gearbox often sweats. It is better to replace the oil seals as soon as a problem is discovered. There are 2 silent blocks in the gearbox mount. If the rear one wears out, designed for 50 to 80,000 km, then the looseness of the gearbox will significantly reduce the service life of the cart-end coupling. Such a silent block costs about $30. And although replacing it takes time, the coupling will last longer. Moreover, a new original will cost $150. As for the suspension on the F10, it is identical to the 7's and is characterized by double wishbones at the front. The original silent blocks, before the first replacement, normally withstood 150,000 km. But if you frequently drive on bad roads, you will have to rebuild the suspension after 75,000. In the front suspension, you can also replace the original oblique link hydraulic mount and the rear ball mount separately. Only the original floating silent block is sold as a non-assembled rear suspension, but there are enough substitutes for other suspension silent blocks. The lateral stability of the F10-5s is provided by the dynamic driver system. In addition to stabilizers with electric motors, the unit is equipped with a hydraulic system with a pump and an expansion tank. The hydraulics are filled with CHF11S, the same as in the power steering. The system works flawlessly, but subject to the fluid being replaced every 2 to 3 years and pumping to remove air bubbles. The F10 also added such a useful option as a rear wheel steering system, HSR. Its peculiarity is that the rear arms are not attached to the subframe, but to a mechanism that simultaneously moves them across the axis. The steering angle of the rear wheels reaches 3 degrees. The main problems of such a mechanism are free movement of the shaft and failure of its position sensors, and they eliminate the backlash using folk methods, since the HSR system, and therefore the repair practice using it, is not widespread enough. But there are no sensors for sale. The F10 was not equipped with the usual air suspension. But there are Sask's shock absorbers with electronic control. Their resource is about 120,000 km. Substitutes are not produced. The cost of the originals exceeds $600. The rack on the BMW F10 with all-wheel drive and a 6 to 8-cylinder engine is hydraulic. On other models it is electric. But both serve for quite a long time, and the problems, of course, are different. Hydraulic is characterized by mechanical wear over high mileage of both the rack itself and the hoses with the pump, but the electric rack is more capricious. Moisture can damage the torque sensor. The drive belt may also break. In addition, the electric rack sensors are so sensitive that they break due to vibrations when disassembling the suspension with a pneumatic tool. The electric rail has been modified more than once. Therefore, in later cars the above problems are less common.